I want to begin this morning by taking a moment to recognize our founder, Helen Comstock, who passed away this past summer. As many of you know, Helen lost her husband, Craig, to FTD back in the 1980s, when there was truly no information about FTD, nor any resources to be had to help a family on this journey. As the disease progressed, she became the sole provider and caregiver for Craig and their 3 teenagers. 2 decades later, in 2002, Helen Ann founded this organization with $1,000 and the commitment that no family would ever have to face this disease alone again. I had the pleasure of visiting with Helen Ann last July, shortly before she passed, and she was immensely proud of what AFTD has become. And I know she'd be thrilled to see how many of us are in this room today. I ask you to join me in a moment of silence for AFTD's founder, Helen Ann Comstock. Thank you. I want to talk to you this morning about 3 things. I want to talk to you about the challenges that FTD presents as we work to come together as a cohesive and effective community. I want to celebrate some of the many, many amazing milestones we have accomplished together over the past 18 years. And finally, I want to spend a few minutes looking ahead together and share my vision and hopes for the future. I first met Helen Ann a few months after she founded AFTD, early in 2003. She was looking for someone to write about the mission and to help raise money. I had a background as a medical grant writer and a genetic counselor, and most recently had been consulting for several rare disease organizations for a number of years. And I knew that most of these organizations never really gain traction. They never graduate beyond the kitchen table, as the saying goes. The first thing an organization must do, if it is going to grow beyond this point, if it is going to raise enough money and create enough momentum to accelerate the science and the development of treatments, is to create a community. I knew this. I knew this from my work with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, with the urea cycle disorders, with polycystic ovary disease, and with the Genetic Alliance, which supports hundreds of rare disease organizations. But I did not yet know FTD. I had not yet met a disease whose symptoms actively undermine the human desire and ability to connect. Now, I don't need to tell anyone in this room how devastating the symptoms of FTD can be on an individual, on a family, on a circle of friends and colleagues. But over the past 2 decades, I have had a unique perspective on how this disease presents similar challenges as we try to form a community centered around FTD. This is a disease that steals people's ability to communicate, to relate to others, to be able to walk in another's shoes, and to understand each other's perspectives. It's a disease that is confusing and hard to pin down. When does it start? Why does one person have one set of symptoms and the next person a totally different set? At the same time, it's a group of disorders in which 2 people may have the exact same presentation, but have different underlying biological processes causing them. This is a disease with no clear delineation. It has movement symptoms that look a lot like Parkinson's, changes in behavior and personality that often are mistaken for a psychiatric disorder, and a language presentation that is very similar to one that can be caused by Alzheimer's disease. This is a disease where some people watch family members develop symptoms and recognize with a dread in their heart what those first signs mean. At the same time, it's a disease that hits most people out of the blue, and we may never know how many families never figure out that the problem has a medical basis, how many never get to a neurologist, never hear the name of the disease that is stealing themselves or their loved ones away, never make it to this room. And it's a disease that invites bigger questions. How can a person still be physically here, but not be the same person they used to be? What actually defines each of us and who we are? This is a disease that presents a lot of questions and confusion and pain, but at first glance, not many clues as to how to break through these barriers and build the foundation of a community. What I've learned from working with all of you over the years is that the ultimate way to vanquish this disease is to use the abilities of communication, of connection, of love that we have been endowed with as humans, and that this disease tries to steal from us. If FTD succeeds in stealing these from some of the people we love, then the rest of us are called upon to exercise these very same abilities just a little bit more to make up for that, to come together to change the future. We need to have empathy for that which we hope to never experience ourselves. We must dig deep down and find the strength and resilience to face another day. We must use every ounce of creative thinking and executive functioning to figure out what this disease is at the molecular level, to find the opportunities to intervene, and to use the best that medical science has to offer to devise those cures. We must communicate clearly and relentlessly so that we can find that common ground. I do not say that this is easy. Quite the contrary. Forming a community under these circumstances is the most challenging work I have ever experienced. And yet, look at this room. As Esther said, more than 500 people registered to be here in person today, and another 1,000 or so registered to join us online. The very act of coming to Seattle, of logging on today, is an act of exerting control over this disease, an act of defiance, an act of resilience, an act of community, an act of hope. AFTD now has 56 professional staff members whose work is multiplied by more than 1,000 amazing volunteers and powered by more than 11,000 donations each year. To me, that is what a community looks like. And the fact of this community is the first thing I would like to celebrate with you this morning. But of course, community is not an end in itself. We need to celebrate what we together as a community have accomplished. We're supporting more families than ever before. This year, AFTD will answer about 5,000 helpline calls and award more than 600 Comstock grants to provide care partners with respite and enhance the quality of life of people diagnosed. This year, we expanded the network of support groups across the country to include ones dedicated to people at genetic risk for FTD, people who know they carry a causal mutation, care partners from the LGBTQ+ community, and Spanish-speaking care partners. And I'm immensely proud to announce that earlier this spring, the number of groups in our support network reached 100. We're educating more health professionals to recognize this disease. Over the past 4 years, we've offered 14 live continuing education credit courses and have provided access to 2 of these on demand. All told, we have engaged more than 2,000 healthcare professionals with these courses. And these webinars continue to be popular on our YouTube channel, where they have been accessed by thousands of additional viewers. Thanks to the work of countless volunteers and our amazing partner, Emma Hemming-Willis, we know that more people are aware of FTD than ever before. Over the past year, more than 1.2 million people have visited our website from more than 100 countries. There they find accurate information, unique resources, and tools like our diagnostic checklists, which more than 35,000 people have downloaded so far this fiscal year to help inform their doctors about how the constellation of symptoms they are dealing with might represent something called FTD. We have mobilized an amazing network of grassroots advocates in our community. Over the past year alone, more than 2,300 advocates have sent more than 8,000 messages to their federal and state lawmakers. And together, these advocates have gotten FTD proclamations and resolutions passed in 36 states. Working with New York State Senator Michelle Hinchey and Emma Hemming-Willis, we have succeeded in passing legislation that requires all clinicians in New York State to register every FTD diagnosis they make. And Emma is now working with wonderful advocates in California to get similar legislation passed there. At the federal level, just a few weeks ago, I had the honor of moderating a congressional briefing on Capitol Hill. Joining me on that panel were Emma, who brought the caregiver perspective, Dr. Onike, two key research leaders from NIH, and Natasha Yasso-Smith, who spoke first person about what it's like to live every day with this diagnosis. That day, we also went to the Hill, where we met with 7 Senate offices and 7 House offices, bringing the number of meetings AFTD has hosted with congressional offices to 35 in just this past year. That day, we emphasized the importance of protecting research funding at NIH, urged them to support the Credit for Caring Act to help alleviate some of the financial burden of caregiving, and asked for their support on the Healthy Brains Act, a bill that would establish a coordinated federal program to support research on environmental risks for neurodegenerative diseases like FTD. Turning to research, I'm proud to say that over the past 18 years, we have invested $44 million in more than 150 FTD scientific studies. These grants have attracted promising young scientists to work in FTD. They have supported new ideas and helped researchers collect pilot data so they could go on and apply for larger grants from places like NIH. They have helped to develop investigators' hypotheses into actual drug candidates to target the mechanisms that cause FTD in the brain. They fund clinical trials that are testing some of these treatment strategies, no doubt in some of you in this room. And they fund our quest for biomarkers, which will soon enable doctors to diagnose FTD accurately and earlier, and biopharma companies to run trials with more concrete endpoints. And I am incredibly proud to share the extent to which we have been successful in leveraging your donor dollars. $18 million, or nearly 40% of those $44 million we have awarded to research, have actually come from partner organizations. This means that for every dollar we have invested in FTD research, we have attracted an additional 60 cents from another organization. These partner organizations include the ALS Association, the Bluefield Project, the Robertson Foundation, Gates Ventures, the Alzheimer's Association, and more. When this happens, we not only leverage our investment, we educate others about FTD. We spread awareness of how a greater understanding of FTD can inform all neurodegenerative diseases. And we broaden the pool of funders who are investing in this disease. But perhaps what I'm most proud of is the unique projects that we have led to bring your voices, your views, and your values into the research space, to convey the human impact of this disease, and to ensure that your perspective informs the way research studies and clinical trials are designed. One thing we learned early on from the helpline was the extraordinary financial burden that FTD places on families. We heard time and time again how people with the diagnosis lost their jobs before a diagnosis was made and so lost health benefits. How errors in judgment led to loss of college accounts and some families' entire savings. And how often spouses had to compromise their own health and their own income, trying to juggle full-time caregiving with being a sole breadwinner. But this was all anecdotal. There were no statistics we could cite. And so we conducted the first economic burden study. And indeed, the study was published in 2017, found that overall, families dealing with FTD face an economic burden double that of Alzheimer's. 37% of FTD caregivers reported that they stopped working post-diagnosis. 58% said that FTD caused their loved one to make poor financial decisions. 2 out of 3 reported a notable decline in their own health. From a year before diagnosis to a year after diagnosis, household income fell by as much as 50%. And with our published data, since 2017, researchers have been able to cite the urgency and relevance of their proposed work when they apply for a grant. Another unique project was the Patient-Focused Drug Development Meeting, which we hosted in partnership with the FDA in March of 2021. Throughout this 5-hour virtual meeting, FDA staff heard directly from dozens of you about the devastating impact of FTD symptoms, the difficulty obtaining a reliable FTD diagnosis, the impact of familial FTD, the lack of effective treatments for FTD, and the overwhelming desire members of this community have and the risks you are willing to take to participate in research to advance treatment options. More than 550 individuals attended live, including a significant number of FDA staff. And more than 500,000 people have watched the archived version online since. And finally, AFTD has been proud to partner with the Bluefield Project to create and support the FTD Disorders Registry, an online database that collects information from you, people diagnosed with FTD, your family members, care partners, and individuals at genetic risk, to ensure that data on the lived experience of this disease is accrued in one place, that it survives the lifespan of any one trial or any one biopharma company, and that this data is owned by our community. This is an important asset. As the registry itself says, numbers have power. And by collecting all of this data in one place, we enable FTD science. We can be key partners to the All-FTD Natural History Study. We attract financial investment to FTD treatment development. And we make clinical trial enrollment more efficient, which means you hear about trials that you may be eligible for faster, and we're helping the companies who sponsor the trials complete their trials on time and on budget. And we all get to the results of a trial faster. And I'm very proud to say that these last 3 initiatives, the Economic Burden Study, the Patient-Focused Drug Development Meeting, and the registry, have helped to set the stage for the FTD clinical trials that are currently enrolling, and for the additional biopharma companies who are currently interested in the FTD space. In 2009, when AFTD hosted our first meeting with industry, we could only get 1 biopharma company to attend. Today, there are 10 companies that pay dues to belong to AFTD's Research Roundtable, and there are more than 50 active clinical trials underway, big and small, in the different variants of FTD, including disease-modifying approaches such as gene therapies and other treatments aimed at both symptoms and slowing or stopping the disease itself. We have come a long way since 2009, from not understanding this disease to actually conducting these trials. Of course, research is not easy, and as much as we have accomplished, this work is far from done. Within the past 6 months, 2 industry-sponsored trials have failed to meet their endpoints. And just recently, we received the news that the FDA is not yet on board with some trial design features that take into account the real challenges in a rare neurodegenerative disease like FTD. So we can see that this is going to get harder for a while. At every step, this disease will be pushing back. And that is why we need each other. That is why community is so important. What I have learned over the past 18 years is that the hope lies inside each of us, in our ability to make conscious choices in the face of uncertainty, our ability to work alongside each other for the same goal, even though we may have different clinical diagnoses or different specific pathologies underlying the same clinical disorder. The hope lies in our ability to really listen to each other with the intent of understanding, the ability to be resilient, to weather the really difficult days without losing faith, the ability to watch someone we love dearly, or for some of us, even watch ourselves change, to simultaneously respect and care for and nurture the person that is here today, while also honoring and loving what is being lost in real time. As I step down from my role, I have 3 calls to action for each of you in this room. The first is to have empathy for each other, for your loved ones, and for yourselves. And anyone who thinks empathy is not an active verb has not lived this disease. Second, join the registry, participate in research, answer those questions, give blood, agree to a lumbar puncture, consent to the ultimate donation of your loved ones or even your own brain. We need all of the data in one place to enable scientists to answer their questions and to attract investment in FTD. And my final challenge is to commit an act of community as often as you can. Share your story and listen to the stories of others in this room. Start a support group, hold a fundraiser, reach out to healthcare providers in your communities to educate them. Keep on sending emails and letters to your government representatives. There are many, many ways, big and small. Committing an act of community is how you gain back some control. This is how each of us can ensure a brighter future that includes early diagnosis, approved treatments, and less stigma. It is going to take each of us working together as a community to realize this hope. Later this month, I'm stepping down as CEO of AFTD, and I am excited to welcome a new leader who has new ideas, new energy, and a new vision for how we can realize these goals. But I will never leave this community, and this community will never leave my heart. Hold on. Let me get through this, guys. We're getting there. Just wait. Leading this organization and getting to know so many of you over the past 18 plus years has truly been the honor of a lifetime. You have shown me the most admirable parts of what it means to be human. The willingness to share of ourselves, to connect deeply, and to choose, even in the face of unspeakable pain and loss, to choose to make a difference. That is what I see when I look out over this room. That is what a true community is, and that is why I know this community will succeed in reaching its goals together. Thank you.